Hi, my name is Dio, and today we're going to be reading George and the Dragon, written by Brian Conway. George and the Dragon. This is the tale of George and the Dragon, a story that has been told for more than 15 centuries. It takes place during a time called the Dark Ages, when kings ruled a land, wizards cast spells, and monsters roamed free. The story begins in the land of fairies. The Queen of the Fairies had taken in young George when he was abandoned as a baby. The fairies raised George to be brave and strong. They taught him to be a noble knight, skilled with the sword, but even more skilled with his mind. In time, the Queen of the Fairies called George to see her. It was time for George to seek destiny. "Your journey begins today," she told him. "You will have many adventures ahead, to be sure. You should not expect an easy path. Life is seldom easy." The Queen of the Fairies spoke kindly to young George. "The world is filled with monsters and battles. You will meet kings and paupers, wizards and witches, evil princes and kind princesses," she said. "As you travel, you must always remember one thing," the Queen added, tapping George's silver battle helmet. "Your greatest weapon is your brain." Then George set off. He traveled for weeks. As he approached a town called Selene, he noticed the land had changed from lush and green to dark and desolate. It seemed the ground had been crossed by fire. There was no grass, only the darkest mud. The trees were bare and black, and a foul stench filled the air. George made his way through the bleak landscape until he saw a castle in the distance. A high, solid wall surrounded the castle and the small city around it. The gate was closed up tight. A beautiful woman approached George. "You must leave here," she warned. "It isn't safe." "But I am a brave knight, here to help you," George said. "It is my destiny. I will assist you at all costs." "Alas, sir," the woman replied, "you are but one man. I fear that you cannot help." "I will not leave," said George. "Please let me try." "I am Princess Sabra," she said. "Come with me." Sabra explained why the kingdom lived in such fear. A wicked dragon lived in the caves of a nearby forest, she told him. The horrible beast was ravaging the land and eating all of the animals. The princess explained that when the dragon finished eating the animals, he would certainly look for a new source of food. When that happened, the townspeople were in danger of becoming the dragon's next meal. "There must be something we can do," George said. Sabra told George of a cave in the dark forest where a wise old hermit lived. She thought that he might be able to help. They found the cave and entered quietly. Sabra and George crept up to the old hermit, who stared into his fire. He did not look at them, but he began to chant. Long ago, it was told, two brave souls would come to know the only way to save the rest. The serpent's weakness is in his breath. With those words, an hourglass appeared at their feet. They were puzzled, but the hermit would speak no more. George and Sabra left the cave. They knew they must hurry to the dragon's lair. They had to get there while the dragon slept. It was their only chance. "The hermit speaks in puzzles," Sabra sighed. "What will we do with this ancient timepiece?" George studied the hourglass. "The hourglass will lead us," George whispered. "We must wait until all the sand has dropped through." George and Sabra found their way to the lair. The dragon was asleep as they entered, but not for long. Suddenly the dragon stirred. It stood and rubbed its eyes. George watched as the very last grain of sand dropped through the hourglass. The glass turned icy cold. At that moment, the dragon yawned a great fiery yawn. George knew this was his chance. He threw the hourglass into the dragon's mouth. The hourglass broke apart on the dragon's tongue in the cloud of mist. The dragon was furious. He looked down to see George and Sabra. Then he stretched out his body before rearing back to hurl a fiery blast at them. To the great relief of George and Sabra, but to the horror of the dragon, only soft snow came from the great dragon's mouth. The dragon took a deep breath and tried again, but his mouth was suddenly frozen, shut tight with ice. The hourglass had been filled with magical icy sand. The dragon jumped into the deep, warm lake to keep from freezing from the inside out. The dragon never bothered another soul. Some have seen him come up for air on occasion, but only on very warm nights. The dragon would not dare stay out of the warm water for too long, for fear of becoming an icy statue. George and Sabra had saved the kingdom. News of the dragon's defeat traveled back to the village. When George and Sabra returned, they were greeted with cries of joy and triumph. The grateful people of Selene were no longer prisoners in their own kingdom. The king offered George bags of gold in thanks, but George wanted no payment for his deeds. "I have set out in this world to face many adventures and adversities," George told the people. "Knowing that I was able to provide a service to those in need is a reward enough for me." George continued on his journey. The legend of his bravery preceded him, but with every stop along the way, he added to the story with continued acts of bravery. Villages far and wide came to know George as the brave and noble knight that he was raised to be.